All right, and the doors are closing. You're all mine now. The doors are closed. You can't get out now. This is my saw trap. I'm just kidding. Welcome to my panel. Hello, MAGFest. I do understand that this is a level 1 noise panel. However, I do think it's going to get a little rowdy. So if you feel overwhelmed by the noise, please don't be afraid to let yourself out. I completely understand. It's a late night. How many drunk people do we have in here? That's right. Right. All right. Welcome to everyone in the world as a furry, including you. Who in this room identifies as a furry? Raise your hands. You guys already know why you're furries. You don't need to be here. Yeah, I appreciate it. Bye. If you were dragged to this panel by a furry, raise your hand. That's right. That's what I thought. If you don't identify as a furry and you came here of your own volition, raise your hand. Whoa! Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay. All right. Awesome. So we're doing great already. Here are some questions I want you to think of as you're kind of going through the panel. Just kind of keep these in your mind. What do you think when you hear the word furry? I'm sure you probably already have a lot of traits that you kind of associate with this name, so kind of keep that in mind. Where do you think the line is drawn between someone who likes animals and someone who is a furry? Just give it some thought. Sure.
If you're standing against the walls, you do not have a chair. The room is overly full. We cannot have you standing. So if you can't find a chair,
raise your hand if you still have a seat next to you. We have literally 1 or 2 left. We have a seat over here too. You probably won't be able to see the screen very well, but thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you guys. I can't believe I got a full panel room. So scary. This is my first time ever doing a panel, so I really didn't expect this many people. I feel very happy. So we'll give them a couple minutes. Thank you again for coming. Sorry you couldn't stay. I love you too. Thank you. All right, so another question. Where do you think the line is drawn between someone who likes animals and someone who is a furry? Keep it in your mind, give it some thought. And lastly, what is your beef with furries? Again, a lot of people have some traits and associations with this word, and a lot of people who associate themselves with animal content might try to stray away from the term furry. So just keep that in mind as we go along. We're going to start with a little history lesson. The really cool thing about animals is that they've always existed. We love that. I know, it's so crazy. And animals and humans have always had a pretty symbiotic relationship. Here we can see some cave paintings in France. We have a water flask from South America. We also have some carvings of elephants in India. Other things that you might know from your history lessons or anything like that are that you've probably seen things like totem poles, you've probably seen things like headdresses. There are also many different rituals where people will call on animals to kind of come into their body and possess them for things like battles and things like fertility and good crops and things like that. This is known pretty much all over the world, which is really cool. So you may be asking yourself, how did we get to where we are today? I'm pretty sure I'm on some kind of list for looking up this picture so I could put it on here, so I'm glad that you're all here to witness this with me. So we're gonna go through, kind of going forward in time, some animal stories, animal folklore and tales and things like that. Aesop's Fables is a really, really great one, things like the tortoise and the hare. Have all of these amazing animal stories about them, Beatrix Potter with the Tale of Peter Rabbit and things like that. Of course, this is not exhaustive. We have tons and tons and tons of folklore and stories and things like that from going back hundreds of years. I would like to talk about what makes animals such good characters. Don't look at that bottom one, it's fine. The great thing about animals is they have such identifiable characteristics. So for example, if you hear a story about a lion, you're going to immediately assume that they're pretty brave. If you hear a story about a mouse, you might think that they might be a little bit meek and shy. A fox will probably be very cunning. A snake is probably going to, cause some kind of trouble as well. it's a great way to just launch into a story. You already know exactly what role these animals are going to play in the story. It also skirts around a whole bunch of societal and cultural issues. For example, if I was telling a story about a guy I knew and I said, he's evil, he's terrible, he did all of these things, I might be a little bit of an unreliable narrator. You might think, what beef did I have with this guy? If you hear a story like this, it might be a racial issue, it might be a societal issue, it might be a class issue. So we kind of get around that whole spiel with animal characters. And that's it. There are no other reasons why we use animals in stories. To pay no attention to the screen. So, moving forward in time a little bit, these are considered some of the very first influences on the furry fandom. We're kind of moving down the funnel of people who consider themselves furries. A lot of people very, very early on in the furry community cite Kim of the White Lion as one of their very first, most interested things that they liked as a child, especially. Looney Tunes, which ended in the 60s, Watership Down, which was published in 72, and of course, Disney's Robin Hood was a major turning point. This was one of the very, very first times that animal characters were used in Disney and hit the big screen. So, going forward in time, the very, very first furry events were actually held at sci-fi conventions. This was, of course, before furry was a term. People got together at sci-fi conventions to talk about anime, sci-fi, furries, all sorts of other stuff. They didn't have conventions for everything back then, so they got together at sci-fi conventions. Here in the top, in that red, you can see a comic called Albedo Anthropomorphics. This is the very, very first comic that used an animal as their main character. Before this, the first mainstream one perhaps, before this, animals were seen as the companion character. They were very two-dimensional. They were known as funny animals, not for the fact that they were goofy, but they were in the funnies. So these were comics that, Garfield and things like that. So this was the very first time. This is the pilot character of this sci-fi ship, Albedo Anthropomorphics. This was massive at the time, and it actually spurned the first ever furry party. The guy that published it, his name is Steve Bellacci, he was at one of these sci-fi conventions, and so many people loved his work that they swarmed his booth, and he was like, guys, this is really cool, I really appreciate what you're doing, but you are making a traffic jam, and I need you to leave. So he issued everyone to go to a hotel room, and that was the first ever furry party. Everybody got together and got to talk about their very favorite comic. After that, you can see Voodie is in yellow. There was the very first furry zine. Artists would write in and submit their own art, and everyone who submitted art would get a copy of that zine. This was, of course, before public internet, so this was pretty much the very first time that furries were able to build a community and talk to each other. On the very bottom there, we have pretty much what I consider the biggest turning point for the furry community, which was the very first fursona. This is by a man named Ken Sample. Before this, every piece of furry art was basically just an animal or an animal creature or an animal person. This was the very first time that someone decided, I want to look like that. So I want to state for the record that Ken Sample, although I couldn't find a picture of him, is known to be a black man. We would definitely not be where we are today without the POC in the community. So yes, please give yourselves a round of applause. We are very inclusive, and we've always tried to be. So yes, love it. The building of a fursona made a massive impact on the community. The demand for personal art exploded. Everybody wanted their own fursona. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, you kind of associate different traits with different animals. So, if you wanted to seem very brave and strong, you might be a lion. If you wanted to see cool and mysterious, you might be a wolf. If you were just really sweet and cool, you might be a puppy or a cat or something like that. So we used this furry as a personal identity. People could explore their different personality traits, their aspirations. Many people also use their fursonas as a way to kind of explore their gender identity or their sexuality. It was something that they could impress these traits on without having to worry about it affecting them. And one of my very favorite things about the fandom, the community, however you call it, is that furry is by the people, for the people. And I know that's written in the Constitution, but we all know what that really means. So the beautiful thing about furry is that we're not waiting on any kind of lore drop. We're not waiting on any kind of author or massive IP to give us the next piece of information. We have the means to make it all by ourselves. We have the means to commission people, make our own personas. If you went home today after this panel and made your own persona, it would be forever submitted into furry canon for as long as you would like, even if you never showed it to anybody. And I know that we all have some, not that I'll name any names, we have some issues with some IPs where things have kind of gone askew past what we want them to be. So we're not gonna worry about that. It's time. We've got to talk about it. We've got to talk about it. So this kind of goes along with the question I asked earlier. What do you think when you hear the word furry? And I know many people kind of think of this side of the phantom. So we're going to talk about why that is, why it seems so massive as a part of the furry fandom. Yeah, so massive as a part of the furry fandom. So, sex in the community. Sex has always been viewed neutrally as part of furry. People were submitting not safe for work art into the zine before, people had ever decided that they wanted personas and things like that. It was always seen as by adults for adults, so of course that comes with some content of sexual nature. If any of you know your LGBT history, of course, things that were happening in the 80s really fell in line with the AIDS crisis. So furries were really some of the first people to stand with the LGBT community. The two fathers of the furry community, the two people that originally got, together to put furry events together were two gay men, Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly. I mentioned those names because they'll come up later. So they were instrumental in honestly starting the furry community, and it was right from the gate very, very gay friendly. So they really stood with people during the AIDS crisis, which a lot of people didn't like because again, AIDS was considered dirty and things like that. So next point, all fandoms have sexual content. We can all agree to that. We've all seen some very sexy cosplays this weekend, as we all know. Yes, there might even be some in this room. We've all seen porn of our favorite characters. We've all seen porn of our not favorite characters. Exactly. So it seems like it's larger in the furry community, but it's really just that all fandoms, any kind of adult content is going to have some of this sexual content. It's human nature. It's totally normal. Why it seems so prevalent now is that it was around 2001 that Vanity Fair put out a really scathing article about furry being lumped in with fetish content. And this kind of spiraled out of control. At this time, furry events were still they were on the rise, but they were still relatively small, so not a lot of attention was paid to decorum. So the furry parties got out of hand. It was completely crazy. People could really learn to be themselves, and they would unfortunately trash the hotels because there's no code of conduct because they really didn't expect the community to get this bad. So as these things kind of happen, as furries are entering the news and media and things like that, a lot of people started to conflate cartoons with children's content, which is to some degree understandable. But so a lot of people automatically assume that furries were predators, not in the animal predator way, because again, it was seen to be pitched towards kids. This cartoon content was seen to be pitched towards kids. A lot of religious groups rallied against them and said that they were, these dirty homosexuals and things like that. They really didn't like the fact that Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly were the biggest names. It was the 2000s. It was, not really the time unfortunately, for gay people to be in the limelight. A little bit of water. So it may seem like sex is a massive part of furry, but it just really got blown out of the water, and it's unfortunately stayed with that stigma for quite some time. So I ask you again, what is a furry? Give it some thought, lock it in your brain. Does anybody want to tell me what they think a furry is? Let's hear it.
Someone who more sees it as like a role play or identity thing versus
Could be.
Who just I like dog because dog is cute.
Could be. Sure.
You get to decide what a furry is.
I like it. One more.
I've heard that it's just people who like anthropomorphize
Great, I love it. It is someone who likes anthropomorphized animals. The Oxford Dictionary says it is an enthusiast for animal characters with human characteristics, and Wikipedia says the furry fandom is a subculture interested in anthropomorphic animal characters. That can range anywhere from, enjoying things like Sly Cooper, Star Fox, all of these other animal games, to fully having a fursuit and embodying that character. And I think, in my opinion, everyone kind of falls somewhere on that spectrum of liking, these different characters, even that just have ears on like these, a humanoid that has animal characteristics to them. So that makes you all furry. I'm still seeing some not so excited faces in the crowd, so I think we're gonna have to hit a smash or pass. I know I just said 2 slides ago that it's not all about sex and that it seems like that, but you're all locked in here with me. So I get to make the rules. So we're gonna play Smash or Pass Furry Edition. Like I said, I think this is going to get a little rowdy. So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the sound, please don't be afraid to let yourself out. We're gonna start off tame. I want you to cheer if you think you would fuck the person on the screen. I want you to cheer as loud as you can and as intensely as you can. We're gonna start off tame. The Catboys from Love and Deep Space. Woo! Yes. Furries. All of you are furries. Every single one of you. All right, we're starting off easy, like I said. This is gonna get harder. Ari from League of Legends. That's right. She's hot, and she's a fox lady. That makes you all furries. Tignari from Genshin Impact. Woo! Yeah. I don't play Genshin Impact, but I know there are a lot of furry characters in there, and I was like, I might as well throw one in. I don't know anything about it. Lola Bunny from Space Jam. Furries, you're all furries. Any character from Beastars? Let's go. Luna from Hazbin Hotel. I'm so surprised so many people came in here and didn't think they were furries. That's crazy. Rouge the Bat. We got one of those in here. That's right. We got one of those in here. Any character from Brand New Animals? Yeah. Look at that guy. He would treat me wrong, and I would thank him. Link from Twilight Princess? That's right. 4 legs. Let's talk about it. 4 legs. If you want to fuck there, you're a furry. Covert from The Lion King? Let's go. This was the first one I knew I wanted to put on this slide. This was the first one I knew that I was going to put on this because everybody loves it. Oh, I didn't realize the mouse was in the middle of the screen the whole time. Balto? Gil from Finding Nemo. If you said yes to this, you're cooked. You're a furry. If you said yes to that, all of you, get your freaking ears on, go down to the dealer's room, get some freaking ears. So, I know this was a short one, but that's it for my panel. This, again, was my very first panel, so I'd really like to expand on this later. This panel is in memory of Mark Merlino, who he actually lost last February. It hasn't even been a year yet. There he is with Rod O'Reilly, again, the 2 fathers of the furry fandom. So I would like to give them a big round of applause and thank them for starting the thing that we have now. So beautiful. If you would like more information, I got a lot of this from a documentary called The Fandom on YouTube. This is especially stuff from the 80s onward. If you're interested in any of the history from the 80s onward, this is where you will find most of your information. You hear from Mark Merlino, you hear from Rod O'Reilly. There are a couple of other huge names that have given their input in this. So please, if you're interested, give that a try. Very last thing is where you can find me. I am a professional tattoo artist. I'm located in Wilmington, Delaware, and I really want to tattoo your fursona so bad. So please, yes, that's me. So if you really want to tattoo your fursona, you should hit me up. I would love to do it for you. I travel all around the country. There is, yes, that's a QR code to my Instagram. There's a couple of the furriest tattoos I've done recently. I know this, again, has been a really short one, but I really appreciate you guys spending your evening with me. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
I've had 3 friends assign me Badger.
Okay.
What does that mean?
The question was, I have had 3 friends assign me Badger. What does that mean? It means that your furry friends knew you super well and are already working on a ref sheet for you. They might have already commissioned art for you. Questions? As far as I know, it's not in publication anymore. I know that there are some zines that are still running online, but I'm pretty sure that ended like at least a decade or 2 ago. Good question. Is it really? So our guest said that this is part of their thesis for their master's program, which I think deserves a round of applause. I think this is really great. Yeah, for sure. All the way in the back. I'm so glad you asked. My persona is a deer. She's brown and blue, and she's got little stars all over her. Her name is Stereo. I almost added some of her art to these slides, but I didn't want the thank you to get too long and self-gratuitous. So if you want to see some art of her, catch me after the panel. I'll be outside. In the red hat. Do vampires count? Do vampires count? No. Good question. I'm sorry? When they turn into bats, yes. It's a half in, half out kind of situation in the green. Werewolves all the time. These are great questions. Any other questions?
Are you open for commissions?
I am open for Telegram sticker commissions. Since I do art pretty much full time, I don't have a ton of time for commissions, but stickers are what I do the most of because they're so simple and easy. Let's talk. In the black? The Banicula? Well, that's a full animal, so maybe yes. Does it have any any human characteristics? Then yes. Your Banicula would work. If you're making it specifically with animal characteristics, that's a frickin' furry right there. Anyone else? A ref sheet is a picture of your persona. It's usually the front and the back. And it's what you submit to people that you commission of your animal. So for example, mine is a blue and brown deer with stars all over it. If I wanted to get my persona commissioned doing a pose or doing something cute or an icon, I would send the commissioner my ref sheet so they would have the exact colors to match, the exact markings to match. It's very, very simple version of your character so that people can mold it into their art style. Great question. How did I know my persona is a deer? I have always kind of loved deer personally. I grew up in the wilderness and I always spent my afternoons looking out the window looking at deer, and I thought they were adorable and stupid, and that's what I aspire to be, so I just knew it was perfect. Good question. Anybody else? Do I assign my friends animals in my head? Yes, I do. Every single one of you in the front row here, you all have furries. We'll talk later. If you want a furry assigned to you, find me after this panel. I can clock you in about 2 seconds after a second of conversation. In the back.
Are you going to the photo shoot in a half hour or the fursuit?
I am not. I didn't bring my fursuit with me. I didn't have enough room in my car, but... I'm sorry? I might. Maybe I'll be an honorary fursuit because I ran this panel. Yes. Is that everyone? I'm sorry? Yes, everyone here is best friends now. Congratulations. If you feel friendless at MAGFest, find someone in this room.
If you're furry curious as a person and you are kind of thinking about going to a furry convention, what's that like? Can you tell us?
I think a furry convention is so much fun. The question was, if you're furry curious and you want to know what a furry convention is like, what is that like? I think a furry convention is a ton of fun. I have actually done furry conventions with a couple people in this room, and they can be exactly what you want it to be. Panels can be nice and quiet. Meetups can be nice and quiet. They often have sensory rooms and sensory panels about while doing my research for this, I found out that relatively 25% of the community is autistic. So they're very, very sensory forward and knowledgeable about these kinds of things, very consent forward. But you can also go to ragers, have sex with as many strangers as you want. They give out condoms at a lot of furry events. So you can be all the way on this side or you can be all the way on this side. It's exactly what you want it to be. Great question.
What was the process that you used to find your persona?
What was the process I used to find my persona? You just know in your heart sometimes. I had been avoiding furry for a long time, like a lot of other people, but I was an artist on Twitter, and if you're an artist on Twitter, you're like a half step away from furry all the time. And I was very lonely in like 2018, 2019, and I was like, wow, these guys look like they're having a lot of fun. Maybe I should try it. I don't know, I like deer, like that's cool, we'll start with that, and it never changed. It never changed. I knew the second. There's always a little bit of fur inside of me, and now there's fur on the outside of me. Is that everybody? Thank you so much for coming to my panel. Sure. No, go for it.
So, I don't know how to formulate this whole
Sure.
question, so I'm just going to say.
Go for it.
So, like, for me, my favorite animal is entirely different from, like, what I sort of identify with in terms of, like, furry side.
Totally normal.
Is that, like, generally the case? Or
So the question was, my favorite animal is different from the animal I associate myself with. That's actually pretty common, and what a lot of people do is they'll have one main persona, and they'll have several other OCs. That's the beautiful thing about furries. You can have as many characters as you want to. People have entire accounts online just dedicated to different identities. So if, for example, you wanted one that was just yourself, and that was exactly how you were, that would be the animal you're portraying yourself as. If you wanted, you could have one as your favorite animal, and that could be what you aspire to be, very strong, very elegant, whatever you're kind of picturing, you could make that as your OC. The world is your oyster.
Or not really a question, but an addition is the persona does come from persona, so it
Yes.
can be different parts of yourself.
Yes, very true.
It's like parts of yourself that you like, ones that you don't like some that you're just like, this is how I am around like these kind of people, this is what I'm like when I'm alone.
The addition.
That's your personality.
Yeah, the addition was that fursona comes from the word persona, of course, which is an indicator of yourself. So it can be the things that you like about yourself. You can omit all of the stuff you don't like. That's another beautiful thing about furry is that it is an idealized version of yourself. You can be silly, goofy, beautiful, sexy, whatever you want to be is your fursona. You can take what you like and leave what you don't. Great. One more question in the purple?
It felt like in the early 2000s, there were a lot of very popular video game franchises.
Yes.
That also felt very furry.
Yes.
Thinking like Star Fox, Sly Cooper, and like.
Sure.
Did this lead to like a big explosion in furry fandom?
It really did. So I will say, so the question was, there was an explosion of like furry content, especially in video games in the 2000s. Did this lead to an explosion in the furry community? So around the time that all of these pieces were coming out, like kind of slandering furries, the community got extremely insular because they didn't know who they could trust. A lot of people were getting fired for being found at furry conventions because they were seen as the weird sex people. They would go to a furry convention one weekend and get a call the next week that they were fired. So it became, they turned in on themselves and they could only trust each other. So I'm sure there were new furries coming in at that time, but unfortunately they probably weren't accepted right away, or they might have been like furry to themselves and didn't really find the community until later. But yeah, that's a great question. That's gonna be it for us. Thank you guys so much. This was so fun. If anybody wants to see my persona, I'll be right outside. Thank you again. This was so lovely.